Hey guys, how are you doing? Welcome to this lecture. In this lecture, we will be talking about Python functions. So in this lecture, we are going to see how Python works and how to make them for yourselves. By the end of this lecture, you're gonna know how to define the functions, returning the value and the passing argument into the functions. So let's get into it. So basically, functions is the collection of organized and reusable code that performs the action and give us a result basically. So let's create one function that simply add two numbers. So open your IDE and go to this file and create a new file, that is our new script. So how to define a function? Basically, in order to define a function, you use this def keyword. So when you define, this means def all in lowercase, and give the signature of your function, that means give the name for your function. So you can have any name here. So because we are just adding the two numbers, I'll just keep the function name as add here. So next thing is giving this parenthesis. So inside this parenthesis, you put something that is basically your argument. So what is arguments? So basically, argument is something that you pass into the function and make work of that function. Basically, in order to add, you need two numbers. So we'll just pass two numbers here as x and y. So x and y is variable. You just can't put here that is 3 and 4 because 3 and 4 is numbers. So numbers cannot be something that is a variable name. So you should pass your variable. So that must be x and y. So x and y are basically a variable, and that is going to be add in this add function. So after that, you put this colon, and after this you just define or get the body for your function. So what this function is going to do us is addition. Basically, this function will just give you add. So first is to make this function, that is basically defining the function, and the next task will be just calling this function. So in order to call, you just give the name, that is add here, and name should be exactly the same that we use in this definition of the function. So here's the add, so here is also the add. You can't just put here adds and just go here with the numbers. That is completely wrong. And if you have here add, so you must have here adds too. So I'll just stick to add here and just pass a parameter here. So what is parameter and what is the arguments? So argument is something that you passed into the function. So in this case here, whatever you pass here, let me say 5 and 6, and this will be arguments. And this parameter is basically which you use while defining the function. So in this case, x and y is basically a parameter, and 5 and 6 are your arguments. So you have just called now and you just have defined. But if you just save it first, this code should be saved before you run it. And let me say test.py, and let me just save it. And okay, just go in this document and let me just save it here. Now we'll just run it by pressing F5, and you could see nothing happened because we just haven't done anything with this x and y. So you can just print this x and y here. What if you just print here and just save it again and run it? And you could see 11. But usually what we do with the function is we just return from the function. That means you use this return statement and give x plus y. So what you do is just save it and run it, and you could see 11 again. And when you just save it and run it, you could see nothing again because we just have returned, but we haven't done anything of that return statement after you add here. That means first you will just put that into some variable. So when you return from x plus y, so it will just pass x plus y, that is with adding here. So 11 is returned to from this function calling, and 11 will be stored now in x. So when you print this x now, you could see 11. So let's save it and run it again. You could see 11 here. So this is basically our functions. So you defined your own functions. So let me just give you a quick overview what is the arguments and the parameter. So parameter is anything that you use while defining your function, and the argument are something that you use when just you call this function. So we can just use keyword argument in the case of the argument. That means when you use here x equal 5 and y equal 6, what you're gonna do is, it is same as saying that this 5 should be stored in x and 6 should be stored in y. So basically these are our keyword arguments. So previously it was just arguments. Now when you just pass here key and a value here, then it is your keyword arguments. And just save it and run it, and it should print you something that is 11 like previously. So what you can do here is, let me just return only y here, and let me just save it again and run it, and you could see that is we have 6. And if I just remove this 6 from here, and let me say here should be x equal to 5 and here y equal to be 9. So I'll say y equal to be 9. So if you see here, firstly we should have here some order while calling the function. That is, x was just passed in this x parameter and y value was passed in the order in this y parameter. But here is a displacement in the order, so it has not been in order like before. Rather we have now x here and only y. So if you do this, there won't be any error, rather you'll see something that is 9. So if you work with this keyword argument, you can just misplace or do anything with these keyword arguments while calling. So this is really important to know about this keyword argument. So next thing what you're gonna do is, we'll just define another function, and this function will basically be reversing our text. So in this case, this text is our parameter because we have used this while defining the function. So let's do something that is just print. Okay, let me say just print here. That is, you just print the text and just reverse it. So this is the code to reverse, and what you're gonna do here is, we'll just call now, and I'll say something that is, let me say John. So let me pass here John, and now it should be reversed. So let me just save it and run it, and you could see something that is the reverse of the John. So we have defined another function that is reverse, and this is John is basically here as an argument, and this code is the body of our functions. So anything you write here is the function's body. So what is the importance of the function basically? So while you just create this function, so another time when you just want to reverse that any text, now let me say I want to reverse I am engineer. So I want to reverse that text. So instead of again defining this same code that is text here, instead of just doing this, that is just assigning here as an I am engineer, and again you just printing it by the coding, that is you just define here as in code, that is just reverse me again. So in this case it was a small code, a small, but that was basically one line of a code. What if you are dealing with the thousands line of a code? So writing it again and again is unpractical way of dealing with the coding. So what you can do instead is, you can just call this function again to do tasks for you again and again. So that is, in this case I can just pass this text here and reverse the text. That is, you can see I'm engineer has been reversed. So this is basically a fruitful way to work with the functions, and it is really important to know with the functions. So here let me say something, that is, while you define any variable in this function, within this function, it has only a local scope. So what is the local scope basically? That means what you define a equal to 7 here, and let me say b equal to 8, and outside this function let me say I want to print that is a plus b. So it is outside this function, just remember. So after this column, and you should see here indentation label, so this bunch is only the code of the functions, and basically this print statement is outside these functions. So when you just save it and run it, you could see something, that is a has not been defined and also the b also not been defined. You can clearly see we have defined here a and b, but it is showing that a and b has not been defined. but rather when I just call here a is 7 and b a call maybe 5 and just save it and run it, it could show you something that is 12. So this variable which is outside this function are to have the global scope, but the functions or the arguments or the variables that you define inside the functions, in this case a and b, has the local scope. That means it is not visible outside this function. You can't just define here and use outside this function, and it is really important to know. So this will be the wrap for this video. I hope you understand what is the basic for the functions, because it will be really important to know while coding in the games. So see you in the next.